The sun burned low across the broken horizon, the smell of metal and sand mixing with the fading echoes of gunfire. Corpsman Blake Turner moved through the wreckage, his boots crunching on shattered glass and bullet shells, the air thick with smoke, and silence that followed chaos. His radio hissed, but no voice came through, just static and wind. The ground trembled once under the weight of distant artillery. He was used to it, the rhythm of danger, the heartbeat of war. Yet something about this place felt wrong, like the ground itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to see what it wanted to hide. He reached the edge of a collapsed vehicle, flames licking the sides and heat stinging his skin. He shouted for survivors, but only the wind answered. Then he saw a hand reaching out from under the twisted door, pale fingers coated in dirt and dried blood. He rushed forward, using every ounce of strength to lift the wreckage. His muscles screamed and the metal tore at his gloves, but he didn't stop until the weight gave way and he saw her. The soldier lying half buried in the sand, her uniform torn beyond recognition, her face streaked with ash and blood. She was barely breathing. He knelt beside her, pressing 2 fingers to her neck, feeling the faintest pulse. She was alive, but fading fast. He reached for her gear to check for medical info, but his hand froze mid-motion. His eyes locked on the insignia stitched into her vest, a mark blackened by flame, but still clear. Enough to read, his chest tightened. It was the same symbol from his brother's last deployment, the one they said had never existed, the one erased from every official record. He stared at it, his mind spinning back to that day years ago when they told him his brother died in a mission that never happened. He whispered without realizing it. "Where did you get this?" She stirred, eyes flickering open just for a moment, her lips moving without sound, then falling still. He ripped open his med kit, hands shaking as he worked to stop the bleeding, his training taking over, even as his mind screamed for answers. Who was she? What unit was she from? Why did she have that insignia? The same one that haunted his nightmares for years. He wrapped her, wounds, and radioed for evac. But the static returned no signal. Just dead air, like the desert itself refused to let the truth escape. He looked at her face under the soot and blood. She looked too young to carry that mark, too calm even in pain. Noticed faint scars along her wrist, old burns maybe from the same blast that ended everything for his brother. The thought made his stomach twist as he realized she might know something. Something. No one ever told him. The chopper was still miles out, maybe more, and the enemy lines were closing in fast. He pulled her over his shoulder, the sand slipping beneath his boots as he moved toward higher ground. Every step, a battle against exhaustion. He reached a half-destroyed bunker and laid her down in the shadow of cracked walls, the air inside cold and dry, the light filtering through bullet holes like fractured stars. He cleaned the wounds with trembling hands, his mind racing through possibilities, spies, deserters, experiments he had. Seen soldiers with classified patches before, but never this one. Never the Black Eagle surrounded by 3 blades, the symbol his brother once called the Mark of the Forgotten. She coughed weakly, her eyes opening again, and this time her voice came, outbroken, but clear enough to send a chill through him. She whispered his name. Blake froze, the sound of it tearing through the silence. How could she know his name? He leaned closer, asking, "Who are you? What happened out there?" But she just looked, past him toward the burned horizon, her eyes full of something between fear and guilt. Before she could say more, the ground rumbled, distant engines approaching. He peered through the cracks in the wall, spotting dark figures moving across the dunes. They were coming back, searching the wreck for survivors. He reached for his weapon, his mind split between duty and the desperate need to know the truth behind that insignia. The wind howled through the bunker, carrying the scent of smoke and gun. Oil. He could hear the footsteps now, faint but growing louder. She tried to move, but he held her still, whispering, "Stay quiet. Stay low." The attackers' voices echoed outside, sharp foreign commands mixed with static. He could hear the clatter of metal, the sound of weapons being loaded. They were checking the wreckage, maybe moments away from finding the bunker. He glanced at her. She was staring at him again, eyes dark with something he couldn't name. Then she whispered a single word: Meridian. The name struck him like a hammer. His breath caught his brother used that word once before he died, but he never explained it. Blake whispered back, "What did you say?" She didn't answer, her strength fading again, her hand clutching at his wrist, her fingers cold as ice. The engines roared louder, lights flashing across the sand shadows moving closer. The insignia on her gear glinted faintly in the dim light, like a warning or a memory returning to life. He looked down at her face and realized that this was no random survivor. She was connected to his past in ways he wasn't ready to face, and the truth waiting beneath the silence was about to change everything. Blake waited until the engines faded into the distance before he moved the desert quiet again, but his heart was still pounding. He sat beside her, trying to keep his thoughts steady. Though every part of him trembled with unease, the words she had whispered, Meridian, circled in his mind like a ghost. He remembered the last time he heard it. His brother had said it during their final call before the blackout transmission. The one command had erased from the records. Meridian was never a place, it was something else. A shadow mission, a buried operation that was never meant to surface. The wounded soldier stirred her breathing ragged. The color drained from her face. He checked her vitals, his fingers brushing the insignia again, the same black eagle and 3 blades, the same emblem on his brother's old notebook that he had kept hidden for years. She opened her eyes again and whispered water. He gave her a few drops from his canteen. She looked at him for a long moment as if measuring his soul. Then she said quietly, "I know who you are, that name on your tag. Turner, your brother was Daniel. You were not supposed to be here." Blake froze, his throat tightening. "How do you know that?" he asked, but she didn't answer. She turned her head toward the doorway. Her body trembling with effort, she tried to sit up, but the pain forced her down again. She said, "He saved me that night. The ambush, he never left. He covered us until the end, and they left him there." Blake felt his chest ache as if someone had torn open an old scar. He whispered, "No. They told me there were no survivors, no witnesses, no one left to bring home." She closed her eyes and said softly, "That's what they wanted you to believe." He looked out into the night, the dunes glowing faintly under the thin moonlight. Everything he had been told was a lie. He could feel it. She was proof she was the missing link to the truth he had been chasing without realizing it. But before he could ask more, the sound of a radio broke the silence. A faint signal from her vest still functioning. He picked it, up adjusting the frequency. A coded message repeated over and over, the same voice calling for extraction. The call sign was Meridian 9, his brother's final unit. Call sign, the words made the air colder. He stared at the radio, the message looping, again and again like a ghost transmission. Her eyes flickered open. She said, "It's not over yet. They're coming back for me, but not to save me. They want to erase everything." Blake's grip tightened around his weapon. He demanded to know who they were. She said nothing, only pointed toward the insignia on her gear and whispered, "They made me wear it. They said it would keep me safe, but it's a mark of death now." He didn't understand, but he could feel the dread in her voice, as if she had seen something no human should see. The bunker lights flickered. A distant explosion rolled through the desert, shaking dust from the ceiling. The enemy patrol had returned. He grabbed her gear and helped her to her feet. She could barely stand, but her eyes were fierce, determined, as if she had carried this mission long before he ever arrived. They moved through the back of the bunker into a narrow tunnel once used for storage, now filled with debris. He led the way, his flashlight flickering. Across rusted walls, old ammo crates and bones of the forgotten. She whispered, He didn't die for nothing, and I have to finish it. Blake turned to her. What do you mean, finish what? But she didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out a small device from her pocket. Its casing cracked wires exposed a signal beacon. She said, it's a tracker for Meridian operatives, but it's been reprogrammed. It's not calling them, it's exposing them. She looked at him with eyes full of pain and resolve when this activates, they'll know we're still alive and they'll come. But when they do, we have one chance to reveal everything. He realized she was planning something that could cost both of them their lives. They reached the end of the tunnel, emerging into the open dunes, the horizon stretching endless and silent under the faint glow of stars, the air thick with dust and secrets. She stumbled once and he caught her voice breaking as she said, Daniel tried to warn them. He tried to send the files before the strike, but they intercepted the signal. I found what he left behind, and now it's my turn to finish it. Blake felt his throat tighten. He had spent years trying to move on, but now every step brought him closer to the truth his brother died protecting. Behind them, the night lit up with the glow of headlights and engines roaring, the enemy vehicles moving fast across the sand. She pressed the beacon into his hand and whispered, When the time comes, you'll know what to do. Then she collapsed from exhaustion. He lifted her again, his muscles screaming, but he didn't slow down. The sand burned under his boots as he carried her through the darkness, the stars spinning above like shattered glass. He didn't know where he was going, only that stopping meant death and ahead. The shadows of the desert began to move. He could hear voices behind them growing louder, closer, every echo of footsteps pushing him faster. His lungs burned, but he refused to stop. He spotted a ridge ahead. Sharp rocks jutting like broken teeth, maybe. Cover, maybe salvation. He reached it just as gunfire split the air, bullets kicking sand around them. He ducked low, shielding her body from the fire, his weapon answering in bursts, the attackers closing in. He could see their insignias, too, matching. Hers, the same black eagle and blades. It wasn't the enemy army, it was Meridian itself hunting its own. He pulled her closer, whispering, We're not done yet. She opened her eyes one last time, faintly whispering, Find the file under the name Orion. Then she went still, her breath fading as the lights closed in. Blake clenched his jaw, rage and grief colliding inside him. He raised his weapon, ready to make his last stand as the shadows surrounded them. But before they reached him, a flash burst. Across the ridge, a soundless pulse from the beacon lighting the dunes in white. Every voice went silent, and the insignia on her gear began to glow like it had awakened something far beyond their control. The flash burned through the dunes like lightning. Without sound, the entire desert glowing for one blinding instant, and then falling into silence again. Blake blinked through the haze, his ears ringing. The soldiers who had been closing in were gone or scattered, their vehicles overturned, some still, smoking the air heavy with static. The beacon in his hand, now dark and cracked. Its light extinguished, he looked down at the woman. Her body still, but her face calm, like someone who had finally reached the end of something too heavy to carry. He whispered her name, but she didn't answer, her pulse fading until it was gone. For a long moment, he just knelt there, the wind whipping dust across his face, the insignia on her chest catching faint moonlight. It was strange how such a small mark could hold so much pain. So many secrets. He remembered his brother wearing that same symbol with pride before the world erased it. Blake closed her eyes gently, whispering a promise that he would find what she died for. Then he lifted his head and looked toward the horizon in the distance. Faint red flares streaked into the sky. Someone else was coming. He grabbed her pack, slinging it over his shoulder, and began walking the sand shifting under his boots, every step echoing in the emptiness. The radio on his chest crackled alive, a voice breaking through faint and distorted, calling any surviving units. "This is Bravo Command. Respond immediately." Blake froze. Bravo Command was supposed to be disbanded years ago after Meridian collapsed. He pressed the mic, hesitating before replying. Corpsman Turner reporting found survivor codename unknown hostile activity in Sector 6. Request evac. The line went quiet for a few seconds before the voice returned with a single instruction: proceed. To Outpost Theta. Authorization code. Meridian. His pulse spiked the word again. Meridian. It followed him like a shadow. He kept moving, guided by faint starlight, the dunes endless, stretching in all directions. After hours, he spotted faint structures. Rising ahead, the outpost, just as the voice had said. It looked abandoned, metal walls half buried under sand. But a light flickered inside. He entered cautiously. Gun raised, the air smelled of rust and oil, and something else, a faint hum, like machines. Still running deep below the floor, as he stepped inside, a door slammed shut behind him, sealing him in. The old speakers crackled, then a distorted voice filled the air. "Welcome back, Turner. We've been waiting." He froze, scanning the shadows, but saw no one, just walls covered in dust and old military insignias identical to the one on her gear. He shouted, "Who are you?" But the voice ignored him and continued. "Your brother Daniel left us unfinished business. He tried to expose what we became now. It's your turn." Blake felt his blood run cold. The room lights flickered, revealing photographs pinned across the wall, all marked with red string names of operatives' missions maps connecting bases. He stepped closer and saw her face the wounded. Soldier identified by a code he recognized from classified files, Operative R-27 survivor of the Meridian breach, presumed dead. He realized she had been one of them. One of the very soldiers his brother tried to protect. He found another file labeled D. Turner, and below it one more blank, except for the words active. The lights flickered again, the hum beneath the floor growing louder. A panel opened, revealing a small device inside, shaped like a cube, pulsing faintly. He reached for it, and a sharp voice cut through the static. "Do not touch that, Turner." His weapon snapped up as a man stepped from the shadows wearing desert fatigues, his insignia polished and new, the black eagle shining under the light. The man smiled. "We've been watching you. Since the crash, she did her part now. It's your choice." Blake aimed the gun steady and said, "Who are you?" The man replied, "The real question is, who are you, Turner?" He stepped closer, explaining that Meridian never ended it, changed form after the betrayal. Their soldiers scattered, their files erased, but some continued the mission. Daniel Turner was one of them, and when he went rogue trying to expose the truth, they silenced him. Blake's grip tightened, rage burning behind his eyes. He demanded to know what his brother uncovered. The man smiled again, saying, "You already carry it." Then he gestured to the cube on the floor. The device hummed brighter, as if reacting to Blake's heartbeat. "You are the key, Turner, not your brother." Blake didn't understand. He shook his head, stepping back. The man continued. Meridian developed a biometric encryption for its final archive. Daniel embedded the access sequence into your DNA before his death to protect it. She was sent to find you, but she failed. Now we will finish what he started, unless you resist. The air trembled as the ground beneath them vibrated. He looked around, realizing the base wasn't dead. It was waking up, systems activating, lights flooding the halls, screens flickering alive. One by one, displaying data streams, maps, and mission reports. He turned the weapon on the man, demanding to know what was inside the archive. But before he could answer, the radio on the wall sparked to life, a new voice cutting through, clearer, colder. It said, "Turner extraction in 3 minutes, secure the package, and eliminate all hostiles." The man laughed. "So they found you already." He raised his weapon, but Blake fired first, the bullet striking the wall as the man ducked behind cover gunfire. Echoed through the room, lights shattering, debris falling from the ceiling. Blake rolled behind a console, returning fire, the cube still pulsing on the floor, growing brighter with each shot. The man shouted, "You think you're the hero like your brother, but you don't know what you're carrying." Blake ignored him, grabbing the cube as the base shuddered, explosions rumbling outside through the sand. He ran through the corridor, bullets sparking off the metal walls, alarms blaring. He could hear the whir of rotor blades above the ceiling. The extraction team had arrived. He burst through the exit into the cold dawn, the sky painted with red smoke and fire. He ducked behind a rusted vehicle, clutching the cube to his chest, his breath ragged as. Thoughts spiraling above him, the helicopter descended, soldiers rappelling down with weapons drawn. He watched their insignias identical to Meridian's Black Eagle glinting against the light. He whispered to himself, "This never ended, did it they?" Surrounded him, shouting to drop the weapon and surrender. He hesitated, looking down at the cube, its light now seeping through the cracks, glowing against his palm. It pulsed once like a heartbeat, and then again stronger. He realized it was reacting. To his blood, the light spreading up his wrist, he stared at it, unsure if he was holding salvation or the end, as the soldiers closed in around him and the desert wind rose howling with the sound of something vast awakening beneath the sand. The desert roared as the chopper blades tore through the air, the soldiers shouting orders that blurred with the wind. Blake stood motionless, his hand burning with the light from the cube that pulsed like something alive. The men surrounding him hesitated, weapons aimed but their eyes wide as the glow spread across his arm veins outlined in blue fire. He felt it surge through him like electricity. But there was no pain, only the cold weight of realization. The cube wasn't a weapon, it was a key, and somewhere deep beneath the sand, Meridian's true secret was waiting to wake. A voice boomed from the helicopter, amplified by a loudspeaker. "Turner, stand down. Drop the device or you will be neutralized." He didn't move his mind. Racing, he thought. Of Daniel, his brother's last words before he vanished, "They can't stop what's buried." Blake now understood those words meant more than a dying warning. They were instructions. He looked at the soldiers, their insignias shining under the rising sun, and saw fear in their faces. They didn't know what the cube could do either. He shouted back, "What's buried here? What are you hiding?" The voice from above said, "Classified terminate." The asset, gunfire cracked through the air. He dove behind the wreckage as bullets tore into the sand, the cube still pulsing brighter with every impact until the light became blinding. He felt the ground tremble beneath him. Then the sand split open, a deep rumble shaking the desert apart. The soldiers stumbled, shouting as a column of light erupted from the ground, swallowing everything in white. For a moment there was only silence, and when it faded, Blake found himself standing on the edge of a crater. The soldiers gone. The chopper vanished, only the cube, floating in front of him, hovering weightless above the sand. He reached out and touched it again. The world seemed to blur his vision, spinning until shapes began to form, not in the air, but inside his mind. Flashes of faces, files, coordinates, voices echoing through his head. Fragments of a truth hidden for years. He saw Daniel surrounded by a team wearing the same insignia. He saw their mission, the betrayal, the ambush, and then the final act. Daniel transferring something through a field terminal before the explosion. His voice saying, "If he finds this, he'll know," and then everything went black. Blake gasped for air, the vision fading as the cube fell silent in his palm. He dropped to his knees, trying to process what he had seen. His brother had encrypted the Meridian archive into his own blood, into Blake's DNA. Not as a weapon, but as evidence. Daniel had uncovered something about the program, something monstrous, and the cube was designed to unlock it. He stood again, staring at the endless horizon, the faint hum of the cube returning, a whisper of data threads connecting through the air, transmitting to something unseen far away. He realized it was sending the information somewhere, maybe to the base, maybe to the world, maybe to whoever was still listening. The wind picked up, carrying sand over the crater, and then he saw movement on the ridge. A figure walking toward him, slow and steady. The silhouette familiar but impossible as the light shifted. He saw her, the woman he had buried hours ago, her face pale but her eyes burning alive. She stopped a few feet away. Her voice calm, though the air shook with energy. She said, "You found it." Blake staggered back, whispering, "You're not real." She smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but what you saw was... And now they will come for you." She raised her hand, pointing toward the distant horizon, where a line of vehicles was already forming. Dozens of black transports rolling across the dunes, their engines roaring like thunder. He turned to her, shouting, "How do I stop this?" she said. "You don't stop it. You finish it." And then she was gone, the sand blowing through her figure like smoke, leaving only the echo of her words. Blake's heart raced as he turned back toward the cube, its light dimming again, like a dying star. He grabbed it and ran toward the nearest ridge, his legs heavy, his mind a storm of voices. Daniel, the woman, the commander, all merging into a single relentless truth. Meridian never fell, it evolved, and he was now part of it. The vehicles drew closer, bullets slicing through the air around him. He dove into an old communications pit, half buried beneath the sand. He saw the remains of an antenna and smashed screens from an old station. He connected the cube to the terminal, wires sparking as the system flickered to life. The monitor glowed faintly, demanding a biometric key. He pressed his bloodied hand to the scanner, and the cube responded, its light syncing with his pulse. The data burst through the feed, massive files, uploading encrypted transmissions, breaking open lines of code, racing faster than he could follow. The truth finally waking. Outside, he could hear the roar of engines surrounding the pit, voices shouting above the storm of dust they had found him. But he didn't stop. He watched the screen flood with reports, missions, experiments, and orders, all tagged with the same insignia, each one revealing something darker than he had imagined. Entire towns erased, lives, rewritten, soldiers used for tests, under the name of national security, and at the top of every document, one name stood out. Commander Holt, the man who led Daniel's last mission, the one who called for its cover-up. Blake realized Holt had built Meridian for something beyond war. The radio crackled with static. A voice he recognized, Holt himself, saying, "Turner, shut it down. You don't know what you're releasing." Blake's voice shook, but he answered, "Then tell me, what is it?" Holt sighed, the sound of an old man defeated, saying, "You think this is about truth? This is about control, and your brother tried to destroy it, but he failed. Don't make the same mistake." Before he could reply, a shot rang out. Sparks flying beside him, the soldiers had breached the pit he ducked behind. The console firing back, the cube glowing brighter with every pulse, the upload nearly complete. He felt a burning pain in his shoulder as a round grazed him, but he ignored it. The progress bar flashing closer to full. He shouted over the comm to Holt, "What happens when it finishes?" Holt's voice cracked. "This will bring down everything, every base, every hidden file, every false name. You'll destroy what's left of us." Blake smiled through the pain. Maybe that's the point. Another shot struck. The terminal. The screen shattered, but the cube shone one last time. A beam shooting skyward into the clouds before fading to nothing. The gunfire stopped. The desert falling quiet again. Blake slumped against the console, breathing hard. The soldiers stepped closer, weapons ready, but no one fired. The horizon shimmered with faint flashes, distant bases burning, communication towers collapsing one by one. Holt's voice returned, broken, full of disbelief. "You did it. You actually did it." Blake closed, his eyes whispering for Daniel, for her, for all of them. And then the cube went dark. The soldiers lowered their weapons, the wind howling through the ruins as the first light of dawn touched the sand, and the insignia of Meridian finally lost its power. Blake stood at the edge of the beach, the wind tearing through his clothes, the waves crashing against the rocks below, the desert behind him, a memory fading into dust. The cube destroyed, the chip gone. Meridian erased, at least for now, but the weight of all he had seen pressed on him heavier than any wound he had carried. The ocean stretched endlessly before him, the sun rising pale and slow, painting the water in streaks of orange and gold. He breathed deep, letting the salt fill his lungs, feeling something he had not felt in months, the possibility of a future. The medic beside him placed a hand on his shoulder, steady and grounding. Blake looked at him, eyes raw from exhaustion. "You made it," he said softly. "Not everything is over, but it can be, if we choose." Blake nodded, thinking of Daniel and the woman who wore his brother's insignia, both lost but alive in memory. The desert still burned in his mind. The screams, the fires, the insignias black against the sand. Yet here he was, standing in a place that felt like it could belong to him for a moment, the ocean stretching like a promise that life continued beyond destruction. They moved toward the small beach where the rest of the survivors had set up a temporary camp. Wind whipping sand into their eyes, each step heavy with exhaustion, but also with purpose. Blake felt the grit under his fingers, the first touch of earth in months that was not ash or metal or debris. He knelt for a moment, feeling the world solid. Beneath him, he thought of the note pressed against his chest, the words Daniel had left. The truth is not what destroys, it's what rebuilds, repeating them quietly as he rose and joined the others. The camp was quiet under the first light of dawn, the survivors busy with small tasks. Blake watched them preparing supplies and tents, improvising with what they could find. The air smelled of salt and seaweed. A strange comfort. After months of dust and blood, he sat on a rock watching the waves, thinking of everything that had led him here. The cube, the beacon, the ambushes, the fires, the faces of those lost and found. He whispered their names into the wind, letting the sound scatter over the water. Night fell, and the stars shone sharp against the black sky. The camp settled around a small fire. Blake lay near it, watching the embers glow faintly, thinking of Daniel and the courage he had carried, thinking of the woman and the secrets she had borne. He felt a kinship with both of them, a thread connecting past and present. He whispered softly that he would carry their story. He would finish what had been started, not as revenge, but as memory and warning, a life rebuilt from the ashes of destruction. Morning came slow and gentle, the horizon painted pale yellow, the ocean calm. Blake rose, stiff but clear-minded. For the first time in months, he looked back at the camp and then out over the water, understanding that survival was not enough. He had to create. He had to build a future where the ghosts of Meridian could no longer control the living. He reached into his pocket, pulling out Daniel's note, reading the words, "One last time. The truth is not what destroys, it's what rebuilds." And he smiled. The ocean wind tugged at his clothes, the waves lapping at his boots. He felt the pull of life beyond the ruins, the possibility of something new. The medic stood beside him, and Blake said quietly, "Let's begin together." They walked toward the horizon, the sun rising higher. Each step forward a promise that even after the darkest battles, the world could still be remade from memory. Courage and the will to survive the desert behind them, the ocean ahead, and in that space between past and future, Blake finally felt free.